Hello my lovely people, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chioma because I am sure there's some of you who are only just meeting me for the very first time. You are welcome to my channel, and today's video in particular is one that I am so excited about. Okay, so this is the much anticipated social work Q&A video that I have been harping on about for the longest time. Okay, so finally we get to do it. I asked you to send me your questions, whether you were going to drop them in the comment section or send them by email, and you came through. And I know I have probably already answered most, if not all of those questions individually, but I still wanted to film this Q&A just to bring all those questions in one video, bring all of them together in one video for the benefit of other people as well. Okay, so what I have done is to collate all those questions, and that's why I have my notebook on my lap. All right, because I realized that some questions were kind of asking about the same thing. I hope that when I answer one question, I would have answered all of them. Let's get to it. Osaze and a few other people wanted to know if it is difficult to find a job as a fresh graduate in Australia with no work experience, and how to become a mental health social worker in Australia. So like I said, I already answered Osaze privately and individually, but I think this is one very common question, the question around being a fresh graduate with no experience and landing your first job. So I'm going to address that. I want to acknowledge that it's a very subjective experience, because even though I would say it's easy, there might be someone else out there who would say it wasn't easy for them, and for good reason too. But what I would say here in terms of giving yourself the best possible chance to land a job as soon as you graduate or as soon as you land in Australia with no work experience, there's a few things you can do. So first of all, if you are studying a social work course here in Australia, start applying even before you finish. And I can say that confidently because that was what I did. I landed a job even before I finished my qualifications. When you're close to the tail end of your studies, that is when I would recommend that you actually start looking, like actively looking, put your CV out there. Another thing that I have seen that kind of helps in that process is to be flexible and open-minded. Okay, and I say this, keeping in mind that people have different plans around their social work career. Maybe there's a particular field of practice that you are hoping to get a job in. While that might be okay, you also want to be mindful about how you approach it. And again, if you thought about the fact that social work as a profession is got a huge overlap in terms of the different fields of practice, and also in terms of the qualities and the competencies that you need to develop to work in each of these areas of practice. So the skills are highly transferable across different areas of practice. So if you thought about it in that light, then maybe it wouldn't really matter if you started somewhere outside of what you would actually prefer. So start from somewhere and then work towards what you would prefer. But yeah, like I said, it can be easy to land your first job here in Australia. The second part of the question was how to become a mental health social worker. So with this one, you would just need to complete extra training, and this is on top of your base training to qualify to become a social worker. So on top of your Bachelor of Social Work degree or your Master of Social Work qualifying, you would still need to do a few courses which would grant you accreditation to practice as a mental health social worker. And that whole process would also need to go through AASW for you to get your mental health accreditation as a social worker. I hope that answers your question. So the second question came from Ekama, and Ekama said they completed a double honors program in education and business administration, and they wanted to know if it was possible to apply for the MSWQ program. And my answer to Ekama was yes. My own opinion would be a yes, because looking at the qualifications she's got already, especially with the education side of your double honors program, there might be an overlap into the social sciences, okay? And in that way, you could establish a connection between that and social work practice, okay? But I do know that different schools might have different enrollment requirements when it comes to admitting you into the social work program. So maybe you want to check with the school. I would highly encourage you to send them an email. Schools here are very responsive. Education providers here are very responsive to inquiries of that nature. So maybe you want to find out. And again, read through the specific enrollment requirements for any school that you're interested in studying at, because it might be different. In the school that I attended, which by the way is the Australian College of Applied, it used to be Applied Psychology, but recently they've changed their name to Applied Professions. So the full name is Australian College of Applied Professions. That's what they are called right now. That's where I studied at. And at the time that I studied there, the enrollment requirements into the MSWQ program, I think, was quite flexible, because I think I've mentioned it in a previous video as well, that my classmates comprised of people from varied backgrounds. Some of them came from, backgrounds like commerce, accounting, and things like that. And it seems like it might be similar to your own background. So maybe you want to check. But at the same time, I've also heard about other people who were admitted into other colleges or into other universities that required them to do a diploma, like a bridging diploma, because they were coming from a background that was unrelated to the social sciences, and they were required to do like a bridging diploma before getting into the MSWQ program. So it depends on the school, okay? You just need to find out for the school you're interested in attending whether it's whether they would accept your previous qualifications, okay? And again, just in case you become interested in applying to ACAP, which is the college I studied at, by the way, this is not sponsored by any way. They don't know that I am talking about them. Just keep in mind that things might have changed, okay? So, yeah. The next question was from Balls, and Balls wanted to know the average social work salary here in Australia. Okay. In terms of that, obviously, I had to go online and do a bit of a search. And what I found online was quite, I found varied answers to that. I would have thought personally that the average salary was, 70,000 Australian dollars, okay? Because I remember that I used to see that figure, okay, a lot. But then recent research is actually telling me different. So it appears that the average social worker salary might have gone up. Okay, so I was seeing figures into the 90,000s actually. So I was seeing figures from about 80,000 up to 90,000. I even saw a site that quoted $96,000 annually. Now, I would agree with that. I wouldn't say I disagree with that, because my personal experience, without going into so much detail, would confirm that the average salary is between $80,000 to $90,000. But as well, I have also seen lots of social work jobs and entry-level jobs that advertise at the $70,000 range. But whatever it is, I think it's still above the average, okay? And I think it's a good salary for a start in social work practice. So Afi, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but yeah, you wanted to know about the skills assessment for overseas trained social workers. Okay, Afi, if you haven't already seen that video, but I think you have actually, but for anyone else who might be interested in the answer to this question, I did a whole video on the skills assessment for overseas trained social workers. So please find a link to that video in the description. It's also going to pop up on the screen somewhere. Go watch that video, because I went into much more detail than I can go into right now in this video, okay? The next question came from Juan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly as well. So Juan is a student of social work in Colombia, and they want to know about validating their degree after their studies to come work in Australia. And will they be able to find a job easily with a foreign degree? I think I have answered part of that question. The part that is related to finding a job, I think I've answered it previously. But maybe I'll touch a little bit on that. Let me answer the first part of your question, which is about validating your degree. Again, I would direct you to the video that I made regarding skills assessment for overseas trained social workers. So please check that video out. Now, about finding a job with a foreign degree, in addition to what I have said previously regarding what to do when you're fresh out of school and you're looking for your first job, would be to encourage you to find free online courses here in Australia, okay, that you can take to sort of boost your CV and to boost your employability. So there's lots of resources online. Some of these are like webinars that are hosted by different community organizations that have kind of like a crossover into the social work space as well. Search online, see if they are putting out any free trainings or webinars. And these webinars could just be information sessions to update on what is new in that area or in that field of practice. Okay, so look for those sorts of things and continue to upskill yourself. All right. So the next question came from Madara. Madara wanted to know how I handle stress and burnout as a social worker and how an internationally trained social worker can practice in Australia. So for obvious reasons, I'm only going to address the first part of the question, which is how I handle stress and burnout as a social worker. So what do you think? How do you think I handle stress and burnout? For me, what I do to manage the stress is to develop a healthy habit around how I engage with work. So what I mean by this is, first of all, knowing my limitations as a social worker, because this is a thing. It's a thing for social workers, especially for newly qualified social workers, to come into the field, very passionate, having strong ideas about how they want to practice, how they want to make a difference. And one of the sources of, would I say, disillusionment that comes with having that kind of stance is when you realize that you actually can't change the world. Like, there's only so much that you can do. So first of all, having a healthy expectation of yourself as a social worker and the limitations as an individual, and also the limitations that come with working in your particular organization, because it would mean that you're not putting too much on yourself than you can carry, okay? You're not expecting yourself to be more than you have the capacity to actually carry or to actually perform. Okay, that's number one. And then number two, on the other side of things, is I have a hobby that takes away that stress for me, a hobby that is completely unrelated to what I do at work. So if you didn't already know, I run a small business on the side. Of course, I want the business to grow. I want to make profit and all of that. But there's another aspect of engaging in that business that helps balance out whatever stress comes to me from my social work job. So I engage with that intentionally, okay, to balance out that stress. And I know different social workers would answer this question differently because we're all different and we handle stress differently. Another thing is, on the job, please take advantage of any debrief opportunities that you've got. Supervision is super, super important. Thankfully, in the job that I'm currently working at, we've got group supervision, which is great, but as well, I have external supervision for myself, okay? It's individual supervision and it's external to the university, and I love that, okay? So if you work in an organization that offers that, please do not hesitate to take that opportunity and to benefit from that as well. So that's how I handle stress, okay? So the next question came from Vanessa, and Vanessa wanted to know, coming from a background in media and communication, could she do the master's in social work? Again, I think I have answered this question. So maybe, Vanessa, that already answered your question. Okay, so I'll move on to the next one. The next one came from Natalie, and Natalie wanted to know if I knew anything about social work with animals. Okay, so for instance, using animals for therapy with sick people or people in rehabilitation. And I replied Natalie and I said to her that I didn't really know if there was a specific area of practice that is social work with animals. I do know that animals can be used in therapy. I just don't know how that relates to social work practice, and if there is, like I said, any specific area of practice that involves working with animals. The next question is one from Rufaro. I hope I am pronouncing this properly. And Rufaro wanted to know if there was any age limits for overseas trained social workers in Australia. If you don't mind, I'll take a drink of water here because I can feel my throat drying out. Okay, so just give me a moment. So my response to Rufaro was, as far as I know, there is no age limit to social work practice here in Australia. So on the practice side, no age limits that I know of. But maybe your question was more related to the migration side. Maybe you know something about the points tested system for migration purposes, and maybe that's what your question is related to. For those of you who didn't know, the skilled migration programs for immigration to Australia actually have a points tested system, which just speaks to where you score points in different categories, and then you have to sum up your points to determine whether you meet the cutoff or not. And one of those categories is age. Now, in the age category, the older you are, the more points you lose. Okay, so I don't know if your question was related to that in terms of whether there's an age limit related to gaining points to migrate to Australia. So that's a different topic on its own, okay? But for social work practice, no, there is no age limit that I know of. As long as you meet the qualifying requirements, you can practice as a social worker here. So the next question came from Priscilla. She wanted to know about ACWA. So ACWA is the Australian Community Workers Association, and she wanted to know if ACWA accepts voluntary work as part of work experience. If you're just joining me on here for the first time and you've not watched any of my previous social work videos, I would highly encourage that you go watch the video about doing your assessments, your skills assessment as an overseas trained social worker. In that video, I mentioned the two assessing authorities that you would most likely have to do your assessments through. So one of them was the AASW and the other one was the ACWA, which Priscilla is asking about, okay, just to give you a bit of a background. So please go watch that video and Priscilla's question would make more sense. So she wanted to know if ACWA accepts voluntary work as part of work experience. And this is my opinion, okay? I don't work for ACWA. I am not their agent, and so this answer might be wrong. But I think for the purpose of work experience, ACWA might accept voluntary work. It would have to, however, meet the requirements to return a positive skills assessment through ACWA. And some of those requirements in terms of work experience would be the currency of your work experience and whether it is relevant to the occupation that you're nominating towards migration to Australia. Okay, so if your work experience is relevant, and again, it has to be post-qualifying work experience. So work experience that you gained after you qualified to become a social worker and not before. ACWA accepts work experience, whether it's from a part-time job or a full-time job. So on that basis, I would say yes, experience from voluntary work might be accepted. But again, I would encourage you to find out for yourself if this is the case or not. All right. I got a question from Andrew. I don't know if it is Andrew or if the J is silent, okay? But you wanted me to recommend good universities for the MSWQ in terms of fees and curriculum because you already completed a BSW in India. Okay, what I would say here is, unfortunately, I am not an education agent. I am not a migration agent. I really can't say for sure what every school that offers the social work course is requiring, okay? I don't know what their fees are. I don't know what their curriculum is like. But what I would do is put, by the time I am editing this video, if I am able to find that information, I would put a link in the description box and maybe something on the screen as well. I did find some time ago that there is a website that compares different education providers in terms of the course that you're interested in studying. So it would compare things like fees. I don't know about the curriculum, but I know that they usually have information regarding fees and maybe the location of the course, and some other things that you might find useful. So like I said, if I am able to find that by the time I post this video, then I'll put it up on there. I had another question from Natalie, who is a bacteriologist from Colombia and looking to start the MSW next year. She wants to work in clinical practice, but unsure what the role will be as a social worker here in Australia. So Natalie, what I would say here is clinical practice in terms of social work is viewed a little differently from what most people would understand to be clinical practice. Most people understand clinical practice to be anything that is associated with a hospital or with medical practice. Social work is kind of not like that, okay? So clinical practice could be in a setting that has nothing to do with the hospital. So in saying that, I don't know whether you meant clinical practice as being related to working in a hospital, because if that is what your question meant, then yes, social workers can work in a hospital. And I have also made a video about the social work fields of practice, and I spoke about being a hospital social worker. So maybe you want to go watch that video, because there was more detail in that video than I can provide here. But the short answer is yes, social workers can work in a hospital. In terms of what they would do, in terms of what their day-to-day would look like, please watch the other video that I made. There's going to be a link in the description box. Thank you. I got a question from Fahim. Fahim said they've got a background in accounting and commerce and wants to study the MSWQ. And Fahim was asked to do a bridging diploma prior to starting his MSWQ program. So now he wants to know the future prospects for social work and job opportunities for 2025 when they are done with their course. Okay, and here I would say, Fahim, well done on pursuing your passion. I mean, after studying accounting and commerce and then moving on to study the MSWQ and actually being so committed that you accepted to do a bridging diploma before going into the MSWQ. So well done. In terms of the future prospects for social work, going by labor predictions, because that's all I can go by, social work happens to be one of those really strong areas in terms of employment forecast into the future. So social work has really strong prospects of growth, okay? And so I hope that answers your question. I hope that gives you some hope as to what the future would look like when you finish your studies and are wanting to start your social work practice, okay? All right, I understand that this video has been quite long, but I am just going to quickly address some of the questions that came in through email, okay? So someone also wanted to know if there was any training available for newly recruited social workers. And I guess this question was more related to in-organization training. So the training you receive soon as you start a job or soon as you have gone through the onboarding process. So yes, most organizations would usually take you through a period of onboarding when you start a job, and that period is focused on getting you up to speed in terms of the systems that are used in that job, in terms of the procedures, policies, and all those sorts of things. So yes, if you're concerned about starting a new job and not knowing what to do, not knowing your left from your right, most organizations provide training soon as you start, okay? So someone wanted to know what advice I could give towards migrating to Australia through sponsorship. So the sponsorship option is an option. Yes, it is open, but my honest opinion about employment sponsorship is that it is difficult to get, okay? It is hard to find an employer that will sponsor you. And again, given that social work, even though it is a skill in demand, is not one that is so highly specialized that a lot of employers are willing to go through that process of sponsoring someone from overseas. So setting up sponsorship arrangements from the perspective of an employer is a tedious process, okay? So they have to go through lots of different levels of government approvals, and a lot of paperwork would be involved, and it's also expensive. So not not a lot of employers are willing to set up that kind of arrangement. And that's why I said getting someone to sponsor you through employment would be really difficult. If you're thinking about migrating to Australia, then maybe look at one of the skilled migration options. They are really popular and a lot of people have come to Australia through those options. So maybe look at those options. I wouldn't know why your question was specific to employment sponsorship, but just in case you didn't know that there were other options, I would encourage you to look at the skilled migration options. Again, I will put a link in the description of this video to the immigration website so you can read up on the options that are available. And I guess this brings me to the end of this Q&A session. I tried my best to answer everyone and I hope I did answer everyone. But if there's anyone out there whose question I didn't answer, please forgive your girl. Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. Still ask your question, okay? And I might just address it in another video, all right? If you've still got questions you wanted to ask, please send those questions through. And if there's enough of them, I might do a second part to this video. But in the meantime, please check out all my previous social work videos, okay? I have put them in a playlist, so it's like in a series, very easy to find. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, before you go, please do not withhold a like from me. Give me a thumbs up and also consider subscribing as well. It really helps when I see that the channel is growing. It helps me and it encourages me to keep putting out these videos as well. All right. I will see you again in my next video, which may or may not be related to social work practice, because I do other stuff on this channel as well that is not only social work related. But I hope you stick around for all of it. And good luck to all your plans, okay? I am rooting for you. I know you've got this. I know you can do it. I'll see you again in my next video. Bye-bye.